The young women were amazing. We were in Cancun for a few days, and obviously got really tan. But these are women in their mid 20s to late 20s, which is a great age. But you think about it, and girls, when you're like 18, 19, 20, when you're just entering the workforce, everybody's there to help you and support you in many cases. But then when you get to like that quarter century phase of life, there's really not a lot of guidance. And so I just thought it was so brilliant of Carrie to found something like this, and it was like 35 women, and it was very organized and branded, and she just did a really great job. So I was really, really, like, it's a close friend of mine, and I just didn't know that she was always talking about the group, and I'm like, oh, like, you take these girls to dinner sometimes, but it actually turns out that it was like a serious organization. And I thought about the work that Latasha's doing with Southern Brown Girls, and these girls are a little younger, and just these dope women I know who are lifting as they climb. It's just, an amazing thing to see. So that's all.
Well, I want to share a little bit about dope, amazing women that I know, since now I've muted myself because everybody attacked me unfairly about technological things that are beyond my ability to control. Guess, check this out. Check this out. Uh, uh, there we go. I ran a 5K this morning with my friend Timmy Lola Sobermian and Running Nerds in the race. It is the only Black-owned, Black-run full marathon, half marathon, and 5K in the country. This is the 5th year of the marathon that my friend Tess runs with her husband Malik. It is a fantastic time. You come in, there's a party on Friday, there's a race on Saturday morning, then there's community service, then there's an after party, then there's DJs, then there's food, all Black vendors. We were actually in I did the VIP lounge where they had this fantastic all Black local chefs and everything else like that. It is an amazing experience, and I don't know how many people out there are actually like. Let me say you stole somebody else's medal. No, damn it! I actually found this medal on my own. There will be video on my Instagram of this podcast that I actually run, and I run it every single year. I think the only I might have missed last year because of COVID. I can't remember one way or another. It's funny because down here in Georgia, COVID's real funny. But it's beautiful also because it starts out of Impact Church, which is like the southern part of the city, and then we go all throughout SWAT, right? So it goes through the Black community in Atlanta, and you get people come out on their porches and they cheer and they clap. There's kids there. Look, for those people who aren't super into racing, after your first mile, they actually have mimosas, so you can stop and drink mimosas at mile 1. Then there's mile 2. They got other drinks. Then there's mile 3 when you come back. So I go every year. It's the reason it's a little bit later this year because usually I would try to go through CBC, but I never miss this. There's a really good friends of mine. But yeah, I'm telling people this. Like, it's all this fitness stuff. And I know it sounds strange to me, but sometimes Tiff certainly talks about this on her show. But it's not just fun for me. I'm not a runner by nature. But, like, yo, Tiff, like, there's so many brothers out here and sisters who are in their 60s and 70s who do this race every year. And that's inspiring as hell to me. Like, we were just talking I got some great video, a bunch of this came like, oh my God, we love Joy, we love Kid. Because, that happens everywhere, right? People see it, whatever. But, like, also, I was one dude who's 62 years old. And he said, you know what? He said, I've been doing this for 5 years. I was like, wow. And he's like, yeah. He's like, so the first year we did it, this woman was out on her porch and she had on her, like, her pink house coat and her slippers. And she was like, what y'all boys running from? And he said, diabetes and heart disease. So it's really great. I'm trying to convince her to franchise this out because she has this big electronic board. It's not only your race scores and how fast you did it, but like people come from like all over the country to do this. People come from Michigan, like Black men run from Houston, Texas, and folks came up from Florida and everything else like that. So yeah, it's called The Race. Timmy Lola Silverman. It's been going on for 5 years. It's fantastic. Sign up to go next year. Literally was sold out this year. The 5K was sold out. The marathon is always, it's hard to get marathons sold out. But I think they sold out the marathon too. The only reason they had any spots open is because of this hurricane that people thought was going to be a hurricane. So some of the folks from Florida were afraid to come through. But yeah, that was my Black enjoyment. And also, again, for non-running people, and I'm a non-running person, one thing about doing these 5Ks and marathons, Tiff, have you ever done like a turkey trot before Thanksgiving? You ever done one of those? I will tell you, you do one of these things because they start at like 7 in the morning. You feel like you've accomplished a ton of shit for the rest of the day. like you finish it, even if you just walk it. When you're done, you're like, it is 8:30. I ran 5K. No matter what the hell else happens today, I accomplished something. So, yeah.
Now you will mute. Thank you. This is ridiculous. We just need a studio. Somebody would give us a morning show. We wouldn't have to go through all of this. Congratulations on that run. No, seriously, because if it's a 5K, no matter what it is, I mean, it is an accomplishment. And I just like that it's black, all black, everything, and fellowship and mimosas. I think that's really dope. People are reminding you, Jason, that you told us last week that you had an announcement. And none of us have forgotten. I will tell you guys after we got off the live. I was like, well, Jason, what is it about? I asked him 18 times. He wouldn't tell me. If he did, I was going to get back on live and tell y'all. I'm like, okay, this is what it is, but don't tell Jason I told y'all. And I wasn't going to save it. So anyway, are you still planning to make that announcement? Yes? Well, you're muted. So
It's been delayed. It's been delayed. And I know, trust me, I wanted to share this week. I really did want to share this week because it's a really big deal. It's really exciting, but it's been delayed. Like literally just checked in with everybody I was supposed to be making the announcement with. So it's been delayed. So I am going to tell everybody. I am going to tell everyone that this particular announcement has been delayed. But there is a topic I want to make sure we get to. I know we're doing this new thing back and forth, but there's a topic I want to get into, which is very much along the lines of stuff that Tiffany tends to do, that we usually don't, that I usually don't do, but I want to comment on one way or another. But we'll get to that in a second. But my announcement has to be delayed. It has to be delayed. Going back.
No, please bring up this topic that you want to get to.
I'm going to do something that I don't characteristically do, but I think is really important in this last week. My general philosophy is I am not critical. I'm not publicly critical of a lot of other people in our industry. I don't like it. I don't do it. It's just not my thing. Like, and yeah, there's this sort of generic punching bag of Fox News, right? But I feel like saying this because of the last week and a half. There's a journalist, as we've been talking about Ime Udoka, for the last week and a half. There is a Black woman journalist on ESPN named Malika who has been receiving a whole lot of nasty attacks and disgusting, abusive, nasty behavior online for simply doing her job, which as an ESPN person is both reporting on sports and providing your commentary, which is what everybody else does. And it has been really bothersome to me to see not only the way in which she's been treated, but the fact that a lot of this treatment comes from probably the biggest name on ESPN, which is Stephen A. Smith, who I think was critical of her, in my personal opinion, in some ways that were beyond what was necessary. And it's also disappointing that when you have a colleague, and I'm going to say this because I think this matters, because you and I have friends in this industry. If you have a colleague who works with you at your site as an African American, and even if you guys have, like you and I, right? Last week, I was like, hey, Black men, blah, 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 when we were on the air. And we have our little thoughts and disagreements. But if people were coming after you about your position, I'd be on it. Because we can have professional discussions and disagreements, but ain't nobody going to be going after Tiff online or attacking her or something else like that. That's where you show that you're a real colleague. That's where you show that you're a real African-American colleague. And it's been very disappointing to me to see this woman, who is a professional, who's done great work, have all sorts of nasty things come up about her, and the person she had a disagreement with, who I don't often agree with anyway, saying nothing. And that's what we're supposed to do professionally. And I rarely say these sorts of things, so I want to make this clear, right? I don't care who it is. If somebody came after, if I had a disagreement with Jonathan Capehart, if I had a disagreement, and we're talking philosophical disagreements. This ain't personal beef. If I had a personal disagreement with Jonathan Capehart, Eddie Glaude, anybody, we are still on the same team. We are still professional colleagues. We are still both Black people. And if you see somebody being attacked, and certainly if it's an African-American woman, given the harassment and violence that Black women face simply for doing their jobs in the media, you ought to kind of step up. And if you don't, I think it's a problem. And especially if it coincides with a week where you're platforming a white nationalist like Sean Hannity on your brand new podcast. It speaks something about where your professional integrity might lie. I don't do this often, but this has actually really bothered me to see this week. That's what I wanted to say. Back to me.
Thank you, Jason. One, thank you just for standing up and defending and standing in solidarity with Black women, because I think that makes such a difference. And it's a delight to see, honestly, as Black women, because we don't always see that. But folks like you, Michael Smith, Ta-Nehisi Coates, it's just great to see you all do things like that. Stephen A is a provocateur, and I think that he is someone who chases fame and relevance, more than offering, a lot of insightful commentary. But there are times when he says things and it's like, yeah, that actually makes, a lot of sense. Other times I kind of look at him as like a caricature, not necessarily, I'm never sitting around thinking, I wonder what Stephen A has to say about this, but I imagine that there are a lot of people. I don't follow sports as closely as some people, but I do follow, just not as closely. It's really disappointing because I think if he's not saying anything, then maybe on some level he is either A, indifferent at best, or at worst enjoying it. And that's unfortunate. And so I would just send support to Malika Andrews. And I think what would help is if everybody stopped talking about Stephen A. Question for you, Jason, because the scuttlebutt is he's definitely trying to run for office. That's what I hear. No, are you making a face because you know something? And also, I question anybody who's going to sit, who will lend their face and their voice to a platform like Sean Hannity, especially when, and I did not watch because I will not give, advertisers a second number to participate in Sean Hannity's show. But just what I've seen, Sean Hannity is smiling. They seem very nice and buddy-buddy. And so off the bat, I kind of have to question like why you're on Fox News talking to someone like Sean Hannity. So to me, I kind of know what I need to know about him. And I hope that Malika can rise above it. Because I will tell you, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of vitriol from a lot of white folks, but also from that margin of Black men, who say ugly things. If you pay attention to it, it can be heavy. And so thankfully I learned very early in my career to not, get too deep and steeped into the commentary of some on social media. And this is a real easy thing. It's like, oh, I'll just block or I'll just mute or whatever. Like, I don't even see the comments anymore, but people still steadily, exercising their Twitter fingers. So I hope Malika has done that. But since you made a face, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about Stephen A running for office. Perhaps you have some insight.
So this is what I'll say. I want to address, somebody. There was one guy who's like, Jason, don't be a simp. Let me be clear. Let me be real clear about what I'm saying here. Professionally,
that's me.
We have an obligation to look after each other as Black folks. Now, let me tell you, because Tiff knows better than I know something. We're not even going to talk about some of the stuff that Black folks have had to deal with at various networks across the board, and how the only way that we're often able to survive these things is by receiving support from our colleagues, even if it's quiet, even if it's behind the scenes and quiet. So what I am critiquing is that you have to be in solidarity with your colleagues even when you disagree. You can take all your beef and make it private. But what you don't do is let your colleagues get dragged and let your colleagues get attacked and then stay silent. That is something professionally that I think is problematic. I don't care who it is. Like I said, I don't care if it's a colleague at MSNBC, CNN, or something else like that. You say something. You don't allow these things to happen publicly. Now, as for whether or not Stephen A. Smith or any journalist, I want to be clear, any journalist running for office, I have to look at it a case-by-case basis. There's this one woman whose name I forget who was trying to run for some office, I think up in Michigan. You've got Carrie Lake, who's a former anchor who's running as sort of a MAGA conservative Republican in Arizona. The woman who initially was perfectly comfortable with the LGBTQ A community, and then suddenly now she hates them that she's running for office. I don't know the entirety of where Stephen A. Smith's politics lie. I do know this. I know that if you're friends and you want to platform Sean Hannity, I know that if you're buddy with David Clark, former Sheriff David Clark, who literally engaged in absolutely just despicable human rights abuses as a sheriff, and has been associated not just with far right entities, but essentially terrorist organizations or terrorist sympathizing organizations. I find that if you want to associate yourself with people like that publicly, it's highly unlikely you're the kind of person that I would want to vote for. Now, again, I think sports journalists are sports journalists, just like we do politics, just like other people may do business. And so I don't necessarily look to sports journalists for political analysis. And so if somebody decides that they want to run for office, feel free. Go out, share your platform with people, and hopefully the voters will make a decision based on where you stand. But if your stances thus far are associating with not just conservatives, I know conservatives. I'm friends with Republicans. I'm cool with Michael Steele is legitimately like one of my favorite people. Like Michael Steele is good people. I don't agree with Michael Steele on everything, but Michael Steele is a good guy. Has always been good to me professionally. He's been good to me personally. Sure, Michael, that's my boy. I clown Sure Michael all the time, but Sure Michael is a Republican. So this is not about being a Republican or being conservative. This is about associating yourself with people who are terrorist sympathizers. This is about read some of the things that happened with David Clark. Read some of the things about people almost starving and dying in his prisons when he was sheriff. We don't have to go into the kinds of things that Sean Hannity is doing, because as bad as Sean Hannity has been, he has now been outshined by Tucker Carlson, who literally starts his show with a hood on. Okay? These aren't the kinds of people that you need to associate yourself with if you want to appear to be provocative. These aren't the kind of people you have to platform in order to hear both sides, because there are conservative and liberal arguments for everything, but terrorism is not something that we should ever be giving a platform to. That's not both sidesism. That is being a terrorist sympathizer. That is giving a mouthpiece to people who do not want to see people of color vote, who do not want to see people of various sexualities get to live their lives, people who do not care about our environment, people who are in favor of Vladimir Putin invading other countries. That ain't the kind of person I'm ever going to platform. So to answer your question, anybody is free to run for any office that they want. But if I see the friends that you roll with, if I see the people that you tag, if I see the people that you're chumming up with, the way you deal with Sean Hannity is the way Ted Koppel did. But if you're making them smile and giggle, you're probably not somebody I'm ever going to want to vote for.
Good points. I kind of disagree with you on something. Curious your thoughts. So, like I've had colleagues and coworkers step in it before, and I did not feel any obligation to come to their defense. I mean, some things I'm like, you out there on your own on that one. So I'm like, I can't get with that. Especially when it comes to like Black folks, even if you yourself are Black, I'm like, yeah, if you're talking about, I mean, I don't want to say because I don't want to resurface anything, but if you are talking about the way activists choose to organize voters, if you're talking about, if you make a misstep with the community and do or say something that you shouldn't, it's like, yeah, that's all.
Well, but here's the distinction that I made that I want everybody to understand. And again, my criticism is how I would professionally handle these sorts of things, and what I think African Americans should do as sort of professional colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. If the conflict is with you, right? If it was something that began with you, and it's not an error, right? We're not talking about stepping and defending somebody who said something vulgar or something offensive, right? Like if your colleague's like you said, it's like, oh, dude, all right, I can't back you on that. But like I said, you and I are literally the perfect example of this, because there's a whole lot of people with problematic ideologies who heard what I said on your show and they're like, oh, that's right, that's Sean Tiffany Cross. No, that's not what that was. No, and what you're not going to do is try and write off of my commentary and criticize Tiffany off of it. That's all I'm saying. And to me, I see a similarity in what's happened to Malika Andrews. And it's like, hey, if you're the person who was in that discussion, if you're the person who was in that disagreement, especially if you see the attacks are very sort of sexist, in addition to being racist, in addition to being incredibly misogynistic, I think you have a professional obligation to say something. Not always, right? But in those particular instances, that's where I think you should step up.
That's fair. Yeah. Then in that case, I agree. I completely agree. Well, and also like just stop saying dumb shit online. I mean, that's the thing. When I do read some of these comments, they're so ridiculous and dumb. yeah, I don't even want to talk about some of the things I've seen with people coming after me. But sometimes I will sit and when I was in Cancun for about 30 minutes, I was reading these comments and I laughed my ass off because some of them were like clever and funny and completely inaccurate. People, so there was this woman who was saying, "I never identify as Black. I only call myself American." And I'm like, "Bitch, you don't even know me. Like you ain't talking to me for 30 seconds if you say something like that." But there were hundreds, like almost 700 comments after a few hours of people saying, "Yup, that's true. She is like that. And she ain't this and she ain't that and she don't stand up for Black people." And I'm looking at this like, this is hilarious. Like, it was so funny to me. And then this other woman was talking about my personal life and my dating life. And she was basically like, I only date a certain kind of man. And I'm like, what? I ain't never met this hoe before. Was she talking about what kind of man I date? She had a whole conversation about it. And again, there were hundreds and hundreds of comments. And I think at that time it had been up like a day, it had like 40,000 views. It's just laughable. So to me, whatever Malika going through, I see stuff like that. I'm like, girl, because my life doesn't exist on these platforms. It's just ridiculous, And if your life exists on
I want to add to that because we've seen this twice. That can happen with everybody, right? All of us enjoy a good "this you" tweet, right? Like, we're not saying we're mad about that, right? But what has been interesting to me is what have we seen in this last week and a half? It's like, something happens with a basketball coach for the Boston Celtics, and suddenly random women who just happen to work at the organization, their pictures are being put out. And people are asking inappropriate questions and making suggestions about them and talking about this. I'm not going to mention their names because they had a week from hell, and I don't want to repeat any of that. People finding random photos of Malika Andrews and saying, well, this isn't how she does it. First off, if any people are smart enough to know this, the vast majority of people who work in media, the pictures you see ain't the pictures that we're actually dealing with. And number one, if you see us in that photo, those are probably just people we kicking it with. The people who are intimate and close to us, either you do not know or they're not online. We don't show those pictures online. So you go dragging up photos of people, and I find it to be particularly offensive. Somebody tried that with me once years ago. I won't name this person because I don't want to give them additional attention, but they found a photo of me and they're like, ha ha ha, this is you, hanging out with the LGBTQ community, blah, blah, blah. First off, as if that's a criticism. I'm like, okay, because you know who I'm talking about. But then second, it was funny because I was like, oh, that's actually, first off, it was a woman. Someone who identifies as a woman. So clearly you don't even know. I said, two, this person has a long history, done documentaries about their relationship with hip hop, had a long-standing relationship with hip hop. I was like, so what are you seeing here, bro? Like, this is actually a friend and a colleague of mine. And then this same person went backtracking, probably back to what they say about his last album, went double plywood. He probably went back to this, to complain about it. But that's the other thing. I mean, again, trying to dig in and tag people, I always find those things disgusting. And again, this sort of idea that you can gotcha somebody, that just because you disagree with what they say politically, let me go dig up these personal things about them, put them online, which 80% of the time you're wrong about. Whatever, find some other stuff to do.
They want us to talk about Lizzo. So give your thoughts on Lizzo.
First off, in addition to Lizzo, shout out to our mutual friend, the awesome, amazing, and brilliant Aaron Haynes.
Yes.
Just hanging out with James Madison's Constitution. I think the Lizzo thing is crazy. I think it's just this whole idea of, first off, it's not just Black people, but there's a certain kind of Black woman that many people on the right and some Black people on the right as well just can't stand. A lot of people who just don't like Lizzo because they're mad that she's plus size. Mm-hmm. Period. They're mad that she exists and that she appears to be happy from time to time. Mm-hmm. They just hate it because they see someone who looks like Lizzo and they're like, you're supposed to be miserable. You're supposed to be home. You're not supposed to feel sexy. You're not supposed to feel proud of yourself. You're not supposed to entertain. And even sometimes these brothers are like, she wears. I don't care. I don't care. I can run down a list of people who I find attractive and not attractive. I can tell you about runway models that I don't find particularly appealing that go up and down and show up on TV and Entertainment Tonight or whatever happening. I don't care. Let that person be. Let her be whatever she wants to be. I don't even know how old Lizzo is. Lizzo is figuring out life and entertaining people and everything else like that. So that's the first thing. Most comments about her stem from the fact there's just a hatred of that kind of woman and wanting to operate in the world this way. The thing about the flute, and I know everybody has said this, so I'm not going to say what thousands of people said already. How many people complaining about this even knew this damn flute existed? I didn't. I can't. How can I get mad if somebody told me tomorrow, did you know that LeBron James scored his last basket with the Lakers with a pair of sneakers that George Washington once had made? I didn't know George Washington played ball. I didn't know he had handles like that. I didn't know basketball was invented. And I'm supposed to be mad that LeBron James? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what she did with the flute. It does not matter. It does not change my life. It does not put money in my pocket. It does not take money out. I think that people are obsessed with complaining about a plus size black woman. And then you have a certain number of people, black men and women, who are like, well, and they always want to shame her. I don't care. I objectively do not care. And I hope she finds a whole brass band and does those things where she has like a drum and some cymbals. I hope she just goes and plays every single instrument until they break, because a flute that hasn't been used in 200 years obviously wasn't bringing anybody any pleasure. It has probably been viewed and used and appreciated by more people in the last 4 days since Lizzo played it than anybody ever experienced when Jane Madison had it to begin with. And by the way, as Michael Harriot points out in another one of his brilliant threads, James Madison didn't build that flute. He got it off the enslaved labor of all the people who were on his plantation. He had no job. So that's my thought.
James Madison enslaved over 100 black people. He is no kind of American hero, except to white supremacists and racists, which makes up a good portion of the population. So I think all the people who are out and big mad about it, they consider Americans, the white is silent, and that the rest of us are just guests in their country. And no matter, I've said this many times, no matter how they try to make us feel, this is our home, this is our country. An enslaved person probably built that fucking flute, you know? So, yeah, I thought it was dumb. But I think the bigger thing, Jason, like, because a lot of these things sometimes get outsized attention. And I just feel like, does this deserve that much attention? So you remember what happened with the Sesame Street guy and not talking to the little two black girls, and everybody was all mad about that. And it's like, yeah, these are things to be mad at, but these are also like real individual, like, you know. So, okay, so the big mean racist Sesame Street person got fired. Okay, so now what? You know, like, what? How did we collectively as a community benefit from that? Which brings me to my next topic that I'd like to discuss, please. Thank you very much. I did a black male voter panel with a group or an organization called Black Men Vote. Jason, you were supposed to come. You didn't come. How dare you? It was rude. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. I was talking to somebody about the Rick Caruso, Karen Bass thing. For those who don't know, Karen Bass, black woman running for mayor in California. Rick Caruso, recent Democrat, was a Republican 2 weeks ago, and is now running as a Democrat. And there are a lot of rappers and black people supporting Rick Caruso. The Kardashians are supporting Rick Caruso. No big surprise there. And then I was asking, and this guy, he was telling me, he's like, listen, from what I know of Rick Caruso, when these dudes call him and they say, hey, I need this, I need that, Rick Caruso shows up. If you know, somebody said, you know, I asked Rick Caruso for $50,000, and he said, well, what would you do with it? What do you need the money for? It's like, and he shows up. And I heard this and I got so frustrated because I'm like, this is the problem. Because these are all, you know how a lot of rappers, they glorified, like Trump's name was in a lot of rap songs before he was Trump in the 80s and 90s. People talked about him, from UGK to Scarface. You know, it was a lot of people. This is the problem. When the small margin of black men who glorify that kind of behavior, it's like you can get bought for $50,000. You let Rick Caruso buy you for doing you one favor. And I just think the quintessential difference between the vast amounts of black women is when you come to us and we say, hey, Rick Caruso, I want this, this, and this. And he's like, sure. And it's like, no. I want this, this, and this for us. I want this for my community. You can't buy us for no $50,000 because we don't feel good about that if we're not bringing the whole community along. And so when I see these black men let them use their face, their likeness, and you coming out saying, yeah, Rick Caruso, we with you. Why? Because this mofo done gave you $50,000. You know what he bought him? A $50,000 you know what. And that's not serving anybody in the community. So I'm curious, Jason, because you tell me I'm wrong sometimes with this level of criticism. I just want to get your thoughts on it, please. Thank you.
I think there's a lot of dynamics about what's going on in the LA mayor's race that are a lot more simple than people want to see. Rick Caruso is a rich businessman who has been involved with development. And as a rich businessman, he had relationships with wealthy and celebrity people in Los Angeles in ways that Karen Bass, as a member of Congress, really didn't. And so it's that simple. A lot of these people are apolitical. They're not particularly concerned about Democrat, Republican. They're not particularly concerned about tax policy one way or another. And we're talking about a mayor, not a governor, right? Not a senator. And so if you have a long-standing relationship with Rick Caruso because you attend the same parties, because you've been at the same groundbreaking charity events from time to time, and he says, hey, I'd love for you to be in my commercial for me, a lot of people may think that's fine. They may or may not know Karen Bass. But let's also be clear. Karen Bass had tons of people endorsing her. Tracy Ellis Ross, John Legend, like our friend Yvette. Like, it's not as if I think some of the issue at play here is that the 2 or 3 prominent African Americans like Snoop who appeared in Rick Caruso's commercials, everybody started jumping up down like, oh my God. And it was the same dynamic. Oh my God, black men are not supporting Karen Bass. It's like, if we're talking, first off, it's not true if you look at the vote. But even more so if you're talking about celebrities, Magic Johnson supports Karen Bass. Magic Johnson. it's kind of what you need, right? So I think it's a reflection of Rick Caruso having relationships with other wealthy people who know him, who aren't necessarily that political. But Karen Bass has a long-term career of service to the greater Los Angeles community. So I didn't think it was necessarily that big of a deal. I didn't think it was indicative of some larger problem with how black men vote or something else like that. And again, we tend to focus sometimes in politics on the outliers, right? I mean, you got people criticize Killer Mike for lots of. Killer Mike is doing stuff with the New Georgia Project now. Like, people can also learn and transform and change. So that's, I think, another part of this that, like, whenever we see something that seems amiss, we'll have a tendency to focus on it and want to project as if it's some part of a larger trend, when it might just be the idiosyncrasies of that race. At least that's my thought.
Let me just say, I think why it's a big deal, Jason, is because it's not a surprise that John Legend is supporting Karen Bass. It's not a surprise that Tracy Ellis Ross is out there. But when you see somebody like Snoop pop out there for the opposition, for a white man who was just a Republican, who previously, contributed to MAGA candidates, and who did not always support policies that served us, and in fact supported policies that didn't serve us, it does stand out as like, word, really? And you do tend to pay attention. It's like when Killer Mike sat down with Brian Kemp, yeah, it wouldn't be a surprise if Governor Stacey Abrams was sitting down with T.I. It's like, okay, well, that makes sense. But if T.I. is sitting down with, when this never happened, I'm making this up, but if T.I. is sitting down with Brian Kemp, it's like, wait, what? Like, how that happened? It wouldn't be a big deal if Obama invited a group of entertainers to the White House. But when you see Steve Harvey going to talk to Donald Trump, you're like, what? My G, what are we doing over here? So it's not that I'm saying, oh, look at these droves of black men. I'm saying when these prominent black men allow themselves to be bought and sold on some bullshit, it is incredibly frustrating to us who are more community minded and who are about the collective liberation and equality of black people, and not selfishly about enriching our own pockets.
I think that there are always going to be outliers, but the vast majority of people tend to stand on the side of justice. And so to me, as long as people are willing, and again, some of this also has to do, and this goes with the person we were talking about earlier, it's like, there's a difference between being heard and having influence, right? There are lots of people who have, Tiff, you and I talk about this with a particular show that I'm not going to mention, right? Where you get much, You get much higher ratings in this show, right? Much higher ratings.
That could be any show.
You get much higher ratings than this show, right? And if we get into a conversation about influence versus audience, right? That's where these things come into play, right? There's a certain kind of person who watches this individual show and they operate in certain media circles, and you have a certain kind of influence, even though more people watch you, right? So I look at it the same way. Snoop, for example, I mean, first off, Snoop's worked with Latasha Brown. Like, I don't think I don't think Snoop has bad intentions about anything. I really don't. I think that he probably did a favor for a guy that he knows, right? And that's okay. And again, I've never interviewed the guy, so I don't know. I don't know why people were making those particular decisions in one way or another. I don't know his heart. I would also say this. I think there's a difference between, say, what people were trying to do with Donald Trump at the beginning when he first got into office versus how people may view him now. Dave Chappelle was like, hey, let's give him a chance. I hope he does well. Dave Chappelle now, even though he's gone into some political areas that I may not necessarily agree with, Dave Chappelle's like, yeah, nah, Trump's a problem, right? Steve Harvey, yeah, he may have wanted to go to Trump Tower then. I don't think Steve Harvey does that today. And so I'm willing to be patient with people in their levels of political education because sometimes they recognize stuff that you can't really rock with. I mean, there's plenty of...
Manel 75 knows. I love when people get it. Don't even have to say anything. Thank you. She said she don't get that show either. Manel 75 said she don't get that show either. Yeah, me either. But apparently, show ever, according to.
And that's the thing. And actually, I'll probably talk a little bit about another show that we do actually care about in my closing comments, giving a preview. But here's the thing, like. That's why I don't get too stressed over this. I don't, I like I said, I don't think most of these people have ill intentions, right? I think most of them are just not political and aren't paying attention. If the vast majority of people seem to be moving on the arc of justice, then I'm going to be cool with them, right? If you hear, athletes do this all the time. You have athletes who will come out and endorse another athlete running for office because they know them, even if the person's got problematic policies, right? Those things differ. People who've come out and endorsed Trump at the beginning, maybe some people like that don't endorse him now. So, and when it comes to our specific community and the Black community, look, I think Stacey Abrams will make a fantastic governor. I think Cheryl Beasley will make a fantastic senator. I think Mandela Barnes would make a fantastic senator. I think Charles Booker. There's tons of people that I can talk about. Jones down there in Louisiana. Tons of people I can talk about who I think would do an excellent job. Do I think that they have particular challenges that they may face with certain demographics? Yes, they do, right? That's the history of this country and everything else like that. But would I be angered if a local African-American celebrity or entertainer supported their opponent? Not necessarily. I would have to know where that support came from and why, right? Excuse me. There are people who come out and support problematic folks all the time. I'll have to agree with it, but I don't necessarily see it as a trend. That's just my thing.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Somebody asked me, I can't remember who asked me this question. Oh, it was I won't say, I'll let him tell a story. But he said, let me ask you, what do you think resonates more with some like Black men who don't really follow politics? Do you think the fact that they have Obamacare resonates more? He's talking about younger Black men. They got Obamacare, or that Lil Wayne was released from jail? I'm posing that question to you.
So here's the thing about that. And this is what I was saying about like the breadth of your message versus the influence of your message. I am sure more people cared about Lil Wayne, whatever individual things are happening with Lil Wayne, right? I'm sure that's way more interesting to them because that's what you entertain yourself with. That's what you deal with by choice. That's probably more important in the short term than Obamacare. But in the long term, and when you're making a decision in the voting booth, Obamacare is probably more influential. Lil Wayne, and this is what I think is it's somewhat demeaning, I think, sometimes to voters. Taylor Swift didn't Taylor Swift endorse Hillary Clinton or something? She came out and said vote for her, or said something. She said something to that effect. Is there anybody out there? I'm saying this as a political scientist who's actually studied endorsements and things like that. Is there anybody who was deciding between, Joe Biden and Donald Trump and hearing Taylor Swift convince him to vote for Joe Biden? I don't think that person exists. Now, is there somebody who may have been deciding, am I going to bother to vote or not? And then you hear a celebrity that you appreciate saying, I am voting? That may have an influence. But I don't think the celebrity endorsements tend to help people decide who they're going to vote for. Celebrities tend to highlight whether or not voting is worth it. I don't think anybody changed their mind to vote for Senator Sanders because of Cardi B. But I do think there are people who are like, oh, Cardi B votes? I heard about that. Maybe this is actually important. So I don't know. I have a philosophical difference in how I look a lot of these endorsements one way or another. And I don't think there's a brother out there that was trying to figure out who they were going to vote for based on Lil Wayne. But if I saw a commercial, it was like Juvenile when he did the public service announcement, vax that thing up. Okay. Did Juvenile change anybody who was an anti-vaxxer into somebody who was going to vax? I doubt it. But were there people who may have not been strong on one way or another, like, oh, okay, Juvie out there? All right, cool. I'll go take care of this at CBS. So, like I said, they didn't change their minds. They're just motivating people.
Okay. Seems like a good place for closing thoughts. Only because I'm sleepy and I'm hungry. You want me to go first? Okay. My closing thoughts. I would like to invite the people who join us here every week. First of all, I just want to say thank you because this makes my Saturday. And it's nice just to be able to talk freely, and we try to talk about what y'all care about. When y'all like, okay, we don't care about these internet bullies, move on, talk about Lizzo. I like hearing what y'all want to talk about because we'll talk about it. And it feels like a conversation between all of us, so I appreciate that. So I will ask for your prayers, please, just for me in general, and I will pray for y'all. But I would like for y'all to pray with me that Jason would please get an iPhone, an iPad, anything that will help keep this exchange more production friendly, more audio friendly. Whomever you pray to, I would just ask that you join me in those prayers. Y'all will be at church tomorrow. We call on you, Father God, to please order his steps because we know that you are an all-knowing God and you are who you need to be when we need you to be whatever. And right now we need you to be an iPhone. For Jason, an iPad, whatever that is. So as you go to the altar call tomorrow, please, Father God, we come to you in this earthly dwelling and ask that you would impart some wisdom on your child, Dr. Jason Johnson. So next week, the devil won't be busy trying to mess up our audio, Lord. In your son, Jesus' name, we pray this and ask of thee this thing. Amen.
I hope when Tiffany posts this that she tags Apple or because I will do an unboxing for an iPad next week. Well, actually, I have an iPad. If they want to send me an iPhone next week, okay, I will unbox on the air. I like my Droid. It makes me happy, but fine. The call to worship. What you really need is an organ. We need a production team. If you ever thought about what your life would be like if you throw that phone away and allow yourself to be lifted up, would you come? Would you come today? Anyway, I'm gonna say my quick closing thoughts is two. You know, guys, I always point this out. Well, 2.5. One, obviously, listen to my podcast this week. Great conversation about critical race theory. Super duper excited about it. A word podcast with Slate. Also adding to that next week, super duper excited. I interviewed Jacob Anderson. You know who Jacob Anderson is, Tiffany Cross?
Oh.
Of course you do. You just don't think you do. Jacob Anderson played Grey Worm on Game of Thrones.
Oh! Why you get that interview?
So I interviewed him on my podcast. It's coming out next week. He's the star of the new AMC Interview with a Vampire reboot, where he plays Louis.
I love it.
So it's great. I've seen it. It's absolutely fantastic. He's such a nice guy, and he's a musician. His music, he goes under the name Raleigh Ritchie. You should listen to his stuff online.
I knew
He's a musician.
a rapper.
Yeah, he's a rapper. So great. So listen to my podcast. I'm going to mention again next week. Jacob Anderson, just really really nice guy. Talk to him about great. He has some really interesting things to say about that. Also, check out this weekend. One of my brothers, Tremaine, was involved in it. Kid Cudi, Jessica Williams, and Lauren Harrier are all in the Black animated rom com Intergalactic.
Oh, I
Kid Cudi did it. Yes. Yes, check that out on Netflix. And here's the thing, I always tell people this, yo, even if you don't finish it the first time, just leave it on because that's how the analytics work for Netflix. So make sure you watch. I watched it last night. It was actually really good, really really fun one way or another. And also shout out this. We'll hear future stories about it one way or another. But also a closing thought. You got to find your joy wherever you can find it. It doesn't matter if other people are interested in one way or another. I know it's a challenging time for a lot of people who are working there. But I appreciate the really, really kind words that Trevor Noah put out this week when he said, I'm leaving my show.
yeah.
That was one of the most humble, sincere, and again, I am not in any way diminishing that this is really challenging for a lot of people involved in that show. Um, but it was great to hear. I've been a Trevor Noah fan for a long, long time. I was a fan of his before he came to the United States.
Yeah.
He's a super talented guy. He has a great reputation behind the scenes. Like people say, he's great to work with. He's really kind. He's really friendly. He's really humble. And I hope whatever it is he decides to do, whatever it is he decides that he's finished, I hope that he's happy because I think he has been. I it is not a criticism of anybody else, but his unique perspective on Black Lives Matter and what we've been going through in this country has been so refreshing.
Yeah.
And when we get perspectives from Europeans all the time, we have Irish hosts and British hosts who come here. But to have somebody from South Africa talk about police brutality for years, to talk about Trump as a dictator and comparing him, he was one of the first people who compared him to third world dictators. He was one of his greatest sketches. I always say the turning point when he decided he's like, no, I'm gonna do my show instead of a version of Jon Stewart's show when he compared Trump to African dictators. So I wish him the best, whatever it is that he decides to do, whenever it is he makes his decision. We should appreciate people for what they provide us and not be critical of how long they choose to do it because that's ultimately their choice.
I agree. Wonderful closing thoughts, Jake.
Oh yes, and RIP for Coolio. And you
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah. We can talk about that next. Some of these men dying. So,
Yeah.
well, Jason, you and this run off and next week. Is that a ring? Anyway, and have a wonderful Saturday, and we will see you.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Yeah, this was a very interesting um interview, I could say. Reasoning, you can say. Very informative, one could say. And they touched on a lot of topics very vastly, as you know. I appreciate this live this morning. And all the time, I mean, like, people on this live say that these people are their favorite people, like, favorite of all people. So, you can see that these people are some brilliant people that inspire a lot of people, especially Americans. So, this now, make sure you guys follow Tiffany D. Cross on Instagram and follow Dr. Jason. Okay, y'all? Y'all make sure you follow them and make sure you follow me right here at DI underscore live underscore catcher with a K. Rip Coolio. Gangster's paradise. I'm spending most my time in gangster's paradise. I can't spend it so much. Yeah. Make sure y'all subscribe, share, comment here. I'm out.